Okay, we're live. Um, Today we're here with Louis Elbinger, who is the Green Party candidate for U.S. Congressional District 1 in California. He has 28 years of experience in the State Department. He was the deputy political advisor for General Petraeus, and he was the acting political advisor for General Mattis. Welcome, Louis. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Michael. I'm glad to be here.
Excellent. So today I want to talk about your experience in the State Department and maybe get your opinion on some of the personnel changes that are happening. Do you have an opinion overall right now of the State Department or what you see under Trump?
I do. There's a great deal of concern among professional diplomats about the fact that what they're calling the hollowing out of the State Department. They haven't replaced people who've left so that the amount of work stays the same, but the number of people to do the work is greatly reduced. And that means that things are not getting done. And people with a lot of expertise, people who can, of course, speak the language and understand the culture and develop the personal relationships that make international relations work, are leaving or are not able to do their jobs. This indicates to me what's happening under this administration is that there's a sort of a militarization. The usefulness, the purpose, and the value of diplomacy is downgraded, and the purpose, the usefulness of military action has been upgraded, especially in the new people who've been brought in to the National Security Agency and to the State Department.
Interesting. So what do you think of Donald Trump and his desire to replace Tillerson with Michael Pompeo?
Well, I think it's consistent with everything that Donald Trump wants. I mean, this is his approach. But I know General Mattis, who is now our Secretary of Defense, has always understood, and the military in general understands that diplomacy is our first line of defense. Obviously, if we prevent wars, we're going to save blood and treasure. I mean, this is, to me, it's obvious because I worked for 28 years in the Department of State. But even if you didn't have a deep background in foreign affairs, you can see that negotiating under diplomatic relations with other countries would prevent having to get involved militarily.
Gotcha. And so you think Michael Pompeo's a little more hawkish then? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think he's going to be much more hawkish. I think that Rex Tillerson came from the business world. He didn't really, it took him a while to understand the culture. There's a special culture in the State Department. When I joined in 1984, there were only 6,000 Foreign Service officers. Now, my high school had 3,000 kids. So that's, if you have 193 countries and you have about 50 international organizations, that means you've got 2 high schools running the world, okay? It's grown since 1984, of course, but it's also grown in complexity. Back in the day when I was fresh and new in the Foreign Service, the computers, the internet, and the email were just in their infancy, and we didn't have this kind of communication. Communication was slower. Travel and transportation was slower. Things, as everyone knows, have speeded up tremendously, and so we have to adopt and adapt to the new climate.
Yes, interesting. Okay, so what about John Bolton heading the NSA? Do you know personally John Bolton?
No, I've not met John Bolton. He was the UN ambassador during the time that I was in the Foreign Service when Condoleezza Rice was Secretary of State. John Bolton is a very nationalistic, militaristic man. His ideology is very far to the right, very authoritarian and very right wing. To me, any kind of extremism in any direction isn't going to get us what we want as a nation. I personally am much more of a centrist. This is why I'm a green. I say that the greens are in between the red and the blue. You know, that to me, to my idea of understanding of the Green Party and the green values, the 10 green values that we all hold as Green Party members. And I see myself in Congress as being someone who could mediate between the Republicans and the Democrats to find the middle ground. This is what conflict resolution is about. There are 4 instruments of power that a state can have: diplomatic, informational, military, and economic. These are different ways that a state can affect international affairs. And in our particular case, the diplomatic instrument of power, which is the name of a course that I taught at the U.S. Army Command and General Staff College, is downgraded and downplayed and not used. John Bolton is a man who would elevate and use the military instrument of power first and foremost. But I know from my experience in Central Command at Tampa, at the MacDill Air Force Base in Tampa, from my experience there, I know that the highest levels of the U.S. military established are not seeking wars and more military involvement. They want to. They really care about our military personnel, and they don't want to have them get into any trouble.
Okay. Who were you teaching this class to, the diplomatic instrument of power?
This was at the U.S. Command and General Staff College, and the students were either colonels or lieutenant colonels. A colonel is at a stage just before being promoted to brigadier general. And the military education system with which I'm familiar, because I'm a product of it, I have a master's degree in strategic studies from the Air War College, and then I taught at the U.S. Army Command and General Staff College in Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. And then I was an advisor to General Petraeus and General Mattis. So I'm actually a product of the military education system, of which I am a great fan. Why? Because in order to teach at the U.S. Army Command and General Staff College, I had to take a course on how to teach there. They just don't let anybody walk in and start teaching. You have to pass a course in how to teach. And what I just discovered in that course, the one that I took, was that critical thinking was first and foremost put forth. The idea of what is critical thinking, how does it work, what are the elements of it, why is it important? All of these things were promoted very strongly. This came as a surprise to me. I didn't know that that was the case, but I was delighted to see that. I want our military commanders to be critical thinkers, of course. I hope everybody does. And I did this with a great deal of enthusiasm and passion. They actually had posters on the wall about the elements of critical thinking. And there's actually a foundation for critical thinking. I didn't know that. So although I'm a proponent of cutting the military budget and using the money for 2 purposes, paying down our national debt and allowing us to have the kind of healthcare and the kind of college assistance that we need in this country, I would be very careful in the process of cutting the military budget not to cut the military education system. Because when I discovered it, when I got into it and discovered how valuable it is, I realized that this is one of the strengths of our country.
Interesting. So you used your education while you were in the State Department to manage embassies and consulates. Is that correct?
Well, I have 2 MBAs, Michael. I'm 2 master's degrees. I have an MBA degree and a master's in MSS, the Master's in Strategic Studies. Now, as for managing embassies and consulates in the State Department, which is mostly what I did in the first 2/3 of my career, that was using the MBA, which uses organizational skills and leadership skills. It's a diverse it's a diverse task. When I joined the Foreign Service in 1984. Security was under the I was an administrative officer, and security was under the purview of the administrative officers. the problem with security became so great, it took up all my time. It took up all the time of the administrative officers. They had to take that out and create what they called regional security officers. They took the whole security package, the Marine Guards at the embassy, and anything to do with security had to be taken away from that portfolio, leaving personnel, general services, budget and fiscal, and the other things that go along with managing an embassy or a consulate.
Interesting. So do you think you could, or let me frame it a different way. How will you bring that experience into your role as a representative for the U.S.?
I'm glad you asked that question, because I think the primary, having gone around the world as many times as I have, having traveled as much as I have, knowing the languages that I know, and having the experiences of so many foreign cultures. I had 16 assignments in the Foreign Service, and I served in 9 different countries. The main thing I bring is conflict resolution, the ability to bring people together. And that's really what's needed in Congress right now. A Green Party congressperson would be historical. We haven't had one before. And I would caucus with both parties. I would caucus with anyone who's consistent with our Green Party values. Let me give you 2 examples, okay? People have asked me, well, Louis, if you get elected to Congress, what will you do? And to me, I've gone into many embassies and countries in the world fresh, and I know that it's like walking in to a movie that's in progress. What's the first thing you do if you walk into a movie that's in progress? You have to figure out the plot and the characters. You know, you just don't walk in and start making changes. You have to see what's going on. Now, there's 2 things going on in Congress that I do know about that I want to get involved in right away. One of them would be the Congressional Progressive Caucus. If you Google it, you'll see that there's about 73, mostly Democrat, I believe, Congress people who are part of this caucus. And those are people, I think, as a Green, I could comfortably caucus with because we identify as being progressive. It's interesting that this caucus was started by Congressman Bernie Sanders in 1991. Because remember, a big focus of my campaign is that this is not about Louis Elbinger. I'm representing the progressive Bernie Sanders movement. Okay, it's not about me, it's not about Bernie Sanders, it's about the movement. So how can this movement be represented in Congress? Well, in the Progressive Caucus, yes. Then interestingly enough, there's a working group. It's called the Bipartisan Food as Medicine Working Group in Congress. Bipartisan means that there's both Republicans and Democrats, people who are either from rural districts or familiar with the farming, who come together, and they're talking about food as medicine, which is what Hippocrates talked about. This working group is finding ways to address healthcare problems through the use of regenerative agriculture. And that's another subject that I have a great deal of interest in. But getting back to the question of how do I use the skills that I bring, that I've developed in the private industry or in the government to Congress, these are the 2 areas. I'm going to go in. I'm going to use, with diplomacy, it's conflict resolution, and with management, it's just using my organizational skills to know how to work with people and how to create what the economist Charles Eisenstein calls the more beautiful world our hearts know is possible.
Excellent. So I remember the last time you told me, and it goes along with what you're saying now, is that the Green Party is not right, it's not left, it's forward.
Right.
And I like that idea that you want to work with anybody who will work with you to achieve the goals that you want to achieve. And as far as regenerative agriculture, that's an interesting topic that I think we should maybe do another video the next time we are able to get together. And
that's a great idea, Michael. I'm really proud of the fact that I've got a science advisory board on this subject. I've got some real experts on the subject of regenerative agriculture, and I'd be glad to share my ideas on that.
Excellent. Well, thank you for taking the time to talk to us, and we'll do it again soon, Louis.
I look forward to that, Michael.
Okay.
Have a great day.
Take care.
Thank you.